Good day, friends. On the 13th of August, which was the eve of Pakistan's Independence Day, Pakistan Prime Minister announced the raising of a new Army Rocket Force command, which is big news. I will explain in my video as to how this new command can be or will be optimally utilized by the Pakistan military in a war with India. There is no doubt that this new command is inspired by the PLA rocket force. Therefore, like the PLA rocket force, I expect all the land-based missiles of Pakistan that it has today, the conventional missiles and the nuclear missiles, and the ones that it will get in future, including the hypersonic cruise missiles from the PLA, they will all come under this command. In other words, at present what Pakistan Army has, its Strategic Forces Command, which has under it its nuclear capable missile, that organization in my assessment will merge with this command. So the first question is, what was the need for this command? Now you see, in Operation Sindoor, what the Indian military faced was a one front reinforced war. In other words, it did not face the Pakistan military, but a Pakistan military fully supported by the PLA's non-kinetic capabilities without the PLA showing its hand. So having seen the outcome of Operation Sindoor, the two militaries, the PLA and the Pakistan military, they would have been confabulating with one another, and now it seems China has taken the decision to fully support the Pakistan military to become the leading military power in the region. Very big thing. How this will happen, I'll explain. Now, before I do that, there is some very basics of war that needs to be understood by everybody. Now, you see, any war is fought at three levels. The lowest level is what is called the tactical level of war. This is where battles happen. This is where attrition happens. And this is where, because of attrition, the bean counting of assets becomes important. Then the next level, higher level, is the intermediate level of war, which is called the operational level of war, which is much more than the sum total of all the battles going on in the battle space. And it is this level of war, the intermediate level of war, which will determine the outcome of the war or the campaign, hence very important. Then the highest level of war is what is called the strategic level of war, which is where the political and the military leadership of any nation, they discuss things with one another before the war and during the course of the war. Now, when we look at between India and Pakistan today, the strategic level of war, what would be happening here on the Indian side are three activities. One is that the political leadership and the military leadership, both before the war and during the course of the war, they will constantly be in touch with one another. Second activity would be that the political and the military leadership, will be looking for war withdrawal, a regular supply of capabilities for the war surge. And the third is, since India and Pakistan are nuclear weapon states, it is at this level that if and when to use nuclear weapons, that decision will be taken. So a lot of big activity going on at the strategic level of war. Now, when you compare the two, the Pakistan side and the Indian side, you realize that on the Pakistan side, all this activity will be decided by one single man. And he is the Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir, which means that at the strategic level of war, that decision making will be much faster than the Indian side. And all these three levels of war that I spoke about, they are not in silos. They all impact one another. That means if there is quick decision making by the Pakistan side at the strategic level, it will hugely impact the operations, which is where, as I said, the outcome of a war is determined, the operational level of war. Now let us talk the operational level of war. We saw in Operation Sindoor that the Pakistan Air Force displayed its capabilities at the operational level of war. The Pakistan Air Force did not go to the tactical level of war, which is one-on-one engagement dogfights. Instead, it used the BBRs, fully supported by a digital ecosystem and what they call a new war concept of multi-domain operations. So they were operating at the operational level of war. Now, this new command that has been set up will also operate at the operational level of war. And the reason for that is during Operation Sindoor, one thing became very clear that for both sides in the battlefield, there'll be nothing as the rear or the front of the battlefield. The missiles can go anywhere. And hence, there is a requirement that they operate at the operational level of war. And that is precisely what this command will do. In other words, in the next war with India, on the Pakistan side, we will see the Pakistan Air Force and this new command of the army both operating at the operational level of war where the war outcome is determined. And they will be fully supported by China's Beidou system, the satellite constellation, which will provide round the clock situation awareness, and it will also help the Pakistan missiles for precision firing. And in any case, we know that all the headquarters of the Pakistan military, they are networked by secure fiber optic cables, and hence the constant interaction will be possible between the Pakistan Air Force and this new command, who in any case will have the complete picture, the situation awareness of what is going on. In other words, the whole thing about establishing a air superiority or a limited air superiority will now be done by these two, which is the Pakistan Air Force and this new command operating at the operational level of war. So therefore, once this has been raised, what we will see under the general headquarters of the Pakistan Army is all these organizations. Under the Pakistan Army, we know there is what is called the Strategic Plans Division. Now, this is that organization which is responsible for Pakistan's nuclear weapons and all activities around the nuclear weapons, their management, everything. That all comes under the SPD, which is headed by a 3-star army officer, a lieutenant general. And then we'll have this new command, which has now been raised, once again headed by a lieutenant general rank officer and reporting to the general headquarters. And then there is ISI. Now ISI again is headed by a lieutenant general, and the present ISI chief, he doubles also as the National Security Advisor of Pakistan. So then we have the Director General Military Operation. He also reports to the Army Chief, the General Headquarters, but his role will be at the tactical level because he will be responsible for the contact line, the first line where between India and Pakistan, and hence what he will have under him, in my assessment, will be the rockets, which is mostly the unguided rockets and the artillery. So that is what will be under him. And the role of the DGMO will actually be, as I said, tactical, will be occupation of the enemy territory once those two organizations that I spoke about, one service and one organization, they are able to establish a limited air superiority. That is how, in my assessment, the whole thing will work. Now, questions have been raised that this new command, whether it will be under the National Command Authority of Pakistan or it will be under the Army Headquarters. Now, in my assessment, the National Command Authority of Pakistan is mostly notional. Why? I will explain that in a while. So, all this will be under the Army Headquarters, as I said, the new command. And there are 4 reasons why I say that. One is that former Army Chief of Pakistan, General Jahangir Karamat, he wrote an article in my magazine, Force magazine, in October 2003, where he wrote that segregation of nuclear capable delivery systems would make Pakistan's limited assets, referring to the nuclear assets, vulnerable. That means the nuclear cores should be kept very close with the nuclear capable missiles. The segregation should not be done. In other words, what he was saying is that the SPD, the Strategic Plans Division, and the then Army Strategic Forces Command should be together. And that is the structure that exists today, that they are under the command and control of the General Headquarters, and they are under the National Command Authority which operates them, and they are managed by or administered by the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee. The core thing is that they are under the command and control of the GHQ. The second reason is this was important because the General Headquarters or the Pakistan Army Chief draws his strength from these nuclear weapons of Pakistan, and hence the chief will not want to share them with any other organization. Therefore, we know that the other two strategic forces command in Pakistan of the Air Force and the Navy, what they have are the vectors. They do not have the nuclear weapons or the cores with them. Similarly, we also know that after India announced its cold starts doctrine in 2004, Pakistan announced after that now it had the tactical nuclear weapons to counter that doctrine. But those tactical nuclear weapons were never given or will never be given to the field commanders. And they are being held at the strategic level, which is at the highest level. The command and control rests with the General Headquarters. And the third reason is in June 2025 news came from India that the DRDO was working on a modification of Agni 5, which is the Indian vector for its nuclear weapons with a range of 5,000 kilometers. And the modification was that Agni 5 could also carry bunker busting conventional warheads. So they could bust the bunker, which is go to the depth of 80 to 100 meters below the ground before detonating. And the whole idea was that this could be used against the underground nuclear facilities of Pakistan. And this, the Indian analysts argue, India can do this without reneging on its no first use nuclear policy, which is a stated policy of India, because India would not have used the nuclear weapons, instead would have used a conventional warhead. Now, this command that comes up with all these things, as I said, under it, will provide the deterrence to India to do any such thing. And the fourth reason is, plenty would be thinking as to, is it wise that Pakistan have in one organization, it has both the conventional missiles as well as the nuclear missiles. Well, you see, what needs to be remembered is that we know that in 2022 report came that the Pakistan military officers, they were embedded in the PLA's Joint Staff Department, which is their highest operational command, reporting directly to the highest level, which is the Central Military Commission. And at the Joint Staff Department, it's here that the PLA does its nuclear war planning and also does the smooth transition, the plans for that from the conventional war going to the nuclear war. And since the Pakistan military officers have been embedded there, obviously they have learnt a lot there. So they will be able to do all this in this new command that has been created. Now, I also said that this the National Command Authority of Pakistan is mostly notional. Why I said that is, we know that in December 1998, Pakistan Army Chief created the Strategic Plans Division, and in February 1999, the Army Chief General Musharraf, he submitted the plan of a national command authority to the political leadership, and he asked the SPD to make the presentation. And we know that in February 2000, General Musharraf announced that Pakistan's National Command Authority, under the direction of the SPD, has been set up. And it would be in 2 tiers. The first tier under this National Command Authority, which will be chaired by the Pakistan Prime Minister, amongst other people who will be there. The first tier will be the Employment Control Committee, and the second is the Development Control Committee. This is the first tier. The second tier will be the Strategic Plans Division. In other words, the Strategic Plans Division will be the most important one, since it is the one that is directing the whole thing. So the point that I am making is that everything, in my assessment, will be under the general headquarters, and that is the right thing perhaps to also do from Pakistan's perspective, to stay ahead of the kill chain as far as the Indian military is concerned. So what will all this mean for India? What all this will mean for India is that India now has to dust and go back to the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed between India and Pakistan as part of the Lahore Declaration in February 1999. Now, if you go through that, then you realize that both sides had agreed in principle, but it never happened to establish a nuclear risk reduction center. Now that time has come for the two sides to sit down and talk about nuclear missile restraint regime, and perhaps even a joint verification committee or a commission. And I won't be surprised if the Trump administration would put the pressure on India to do this. This is one way to prevent a nuclear war, because as we know, the new normal that has been created after Operation Sindoor has brought to the war threshold to a dangerously low level. Thank you so much.